So from a lot of the research that we have put into finding posters for similar documentaries to ours, we noticed that a lot of the shots used are portrait shots, and so we decided to contact a photographer who we can interview to get some advice for our own film poster. So, hello.
Hi, my name is Michael Lau. I am predominantly a fashion commercial photographer. I was just explaining that I haven't actually done, in my current memory, done any film posters. I've worked for theatre before and dance productions, which can be similar, but not directly for film as far as I can remember.
So for our poster, we think that we are going to go with portraiture, as I said before. So how would you personally go about a portrait shoot, and so what elements would you consider for it, like lighting and models used? And
well, the first thing you've got to consider is the context, what sort of film it is, and what you're trying to portray, and that can give you a big clue as to how you would actually create something like this. If you're going for something quite moody, which a lot of films can be, I suppose, I would go for maybe a dark background and light your person or people with quite a lot of shadow. If it's a comedy film, for example, it could be really nice and bright and high key. Whatever you do should reflect the feel of the film that you're working for.
if we wanted to have you've already stated this before, but I'll mention again, having a darker poster design. So I explained the idea of us liking a picture of a girl looking into a broken mirror, as we want to call our documentary Mirrored. And we think that for that kind of broken image, it would be best suited to have darker lighting, but how we go about using sort of reflective images, reflective materials in our photography. Like, we don't want to obviously get the camera involved, and we want it to all be quite dark around it.
The ideal position would be to be shooting with whatever's being reflected in the mirror being dark. For example, you can't see it from where the camera angle is, but we have a dark black paper background, so we would probably position the mirror so it's reflecting back into that. And then getting the angles right so you don't see the camera. This is all kind of trial and error stuff. There's no one sort of mathematical equation you can pull out to do it. So it's a case of just positioning your person where you want them to be, then angling the camera so that you've got the right angle of them and still not getting the camera or the photographer within the frame of what you're shooting. There are times when this can't be helped, because if you get a specific angle, perhaps it's quite a straight on one, then the camera might be reflected, or indeed the photographer, but you could possibly Photoshop the photographer and camera and anything else in the scene that shouldn't be there. You can Photoshop them out if required. But I would go, for simplicity's sake, getting your angles right and see how it plays out. Lighting wise, to get a moody sort of dark look, usually one light from an angle will suffice and give you that effect. Again, it's a little bit of a trial and error, because you've got shooting in mirrors is not the simplest thing in the world, because obviously it's reflective. So it's a case of positioning the light to one side and getting it right on your person, and then hoping it's right for the mirror, and then angling each little component until you get it bang on.
Okay, so do you think we should definitely, if that's the case, that we want to go for doing a lot of sort of test shoots, I guess, for it, just to try and...
You should be okay with it won't take you too long. Once you've got started, I think, because we're shooting digital, back in the day this would be awkward in film, because you wouldn't know what's going on until you got your negatives and prints back, but you can sort of suck it and see and try different things until you get it right. It shouldn't take more than, maybe half an hour max to get the situation right. You take a shot, you look at it, and you adjust until you get it as close to where you want it as possible. So so it's not an impossible task by any means. It's just a case of the initial bit faffing about until you've got it right. Well, one light for the effect I think we're talking about here. One light would be perfect. You might want a reflector.
Yeah.
To sort of bounce a little bit of light into the dark side, just to get a little bit of detail. But again, it depends on your situation. The one light technique A will give you the moodiness you require. You'd be kind of lighting from one side, so one side of that person's face is fairly bright, whilst it goes into darkness on the other side. If you're shooting this indoors, you see, you're going to create, because your main light is the actual light that's going to be lighting your person rather than daylight, which is quite powerful. It will give you that bit of control over the shadows. If you try to do that outside, then sometimes the daylight will overpower whatever light you're using. So if you're indoors, you don't need it in a specific room. You don't need to completely black out the room, but you do need to have some control of it. You're switching the room lights off and drawing the curtains will give you a dark environment.
Okay.
Yeah, and then your main light is going to be lighting your person, and you'll be able to control that, you see. As far as what type of light you're going to be using, it depends on what you can actually use, as in, you've got basically two types of light. Continuous lighting, which is like a light bulb of some description. It can be tungsten, which is like an old-fashioned light bulb. It can be LED, which is what modern lights are using a lot these days. Or it can be what I tend to use, which is studio flash or strobes, as you can sometimes call them, which give you that burst of light. Either one will do, it just depends on your technical abilities, how to use it. Continuous lighting is better for beginners in a way, because you can what you see is what you get. With flash, when the flash goes, you can't really tell what's happening, so that takes experience and skill to set up. Well, it all takes a bit of skill, but it takes experience to know exactly what's going on, and a technical way of using the light can be a bit daunting for a beginner, whereas the continuous lighting, you can use the metering on the camera, and even if you're really at basic level, you can put the camera in automatic and it will do something with that. Continuous lighting isn't as powerful as the flash, so therefore setting the camera up on a tripod will give you stability if you're using longer shutter speeds, so therefore you won't get any camera shake and blur. So if you haven't really done a lot of photography where you've had to light a subject, I would suggest continuous lighting. But if you have experience with studio flash, that's possibly the way to go as well. But like I said, continuous gives you the advantage of you can see where the shadows are going to be. Okay. You can see how bright it is, and like I said, what you see is basically what you get within reason.
And for background's sake, just use, like you mentioned before, plain black backgrounds.
Yeah, but if you're in a darkened, if you can darken out a room, if you can black out a room, that doesn't become so much of an issue, because the lighting on the person, anything out of the reach of that light goes dark. The camera, when you set it up to expose for that person, the person will be a lot brighter than the rest of the room, because that light is right there. So if we were curtaining this place out and we had a light here, then I would be hopefully correctly exposed, but the wall would be pretty dark. You know.
So it doesn't really matter kind of what we have in the background, I guess, because
it's not necessarily a problem as long as you can black out the room. Yeah.
And would you recommend for things like that, if there's something that's kind of appeared, just using sort of Photoshop to, I guess, get rid of it away, or would that look too out of place, I guess?
Get rid of, sorry.
Well, like if there's something in the background, say like
if you've
the
darkened
light.
it out quite a lot, then anything left over should be very easy to Photoshop out, because it's nearly all black. But yeah, like I said, if you use continuous lighting, you can see what's going on, and it makes life a little bit easier for you.
Okay. Yeah. And do you take into consideration when you photograph people, you know, like rule of thirds and composition of it? And
yeah, I was going to put a big lecture on Facebook yesterday at this point. I withheld it because I thought I'm going to bore people to death. Rule of thirds and the golden spirals and all that sort of thing are very useful starting points, but I tend to find that in the end, you do things by feel. And in fact, sometimes I was taught when I was at college that you should have people looking into the frame. For example, if the edge of the picture's here, you want them looking across to look into space. But sometimes I find if you're going for a claustrophobic feel, a bit of tension, actually coming right against the frame on.
Yeah.
You know, so rules are there to be a guide, but I think sometimes if you can just look at it yourself and just play with it until it works for you. I go a lot by, I've been doing this for a long, long time. So in the end, I make kind of snap judgments about things and see, everything from my experience has kind of given me a situation where I can actually start judging things without looking to the rules. Because if you look at it, if you do golden thirds all the time, everything's going to be on the golden third, and that gets a bit boring. I find you can mess about with that, and you can bend the rules, you can break the rules, but if it works, it works. Sometimes with the rules of thirds and everything else about composition, as long as you're kind of aware of them, and you can, and a lot of the time they work perfectly, but if you repeat it time and time again, it will become repetitive. So I have a play, and I go kind of almost freehand a lot of the time, because you can, and sometimes you can make it better. Sometimes you do it because it gives you an effect and almost makes the viewer feel a little bit uncomfortable. And if you are creating that tension, which can be, say if the film is either a horror film or a thriller or something like that, then it's a good thing to make somebody feel a little bit uncomfortable, because that's what you're trying to build up. If you're doing family portraits, that can be different again, because if people are wanting sort of happy, smiley family pictures, then you don't want to make them feel tense looking at the pictures. So, yeah, there's massive psychology in photography. I find that really fascinating.
Okay.
And the way people view pictures, the way people interpret pictures, is very interesting to me in terms of actually a lot of the time it reflects back on the viewer, their own experiences as how they view something. Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking to us, and we will take your advice into consideration and apply it to our own poster design. Thank you.
You're very welcome.